The world of gacha is balanced around two things. This is literally my wife, I am going to pull her, and were one to defy this sacred order, they'd be left with using leftovers, destined to rot in the meanders of the account. But there is one who stands above the rest, one which the community has deemed the devil, with her mere presence causing madness into the hearts of players on the summoning screen. That is the fact for everyone, with the sole exception for Plasma 185, of course. Here you can gaze upon our gladiator, a masterpiece build for Nekomata with a substat value of, I think 38, I haven't counted in a while. But anyway, one with a keen eye can also spot the Mindscape 4 and overclock 5 on the V-engine and say, "But this is unrelatable." I know, that is why I am chaining her up, sealing her only source of power, my Mindscape 2 dial-in. I already know that the simple prospect of not using a standard S-rank agent with no Mindscapes, no V-engine, no disk set, no money, no peaches is making certain people furious. Using this dial-in would only make things worse. In fact, I'm not just not gonna use dial-in, I am sending Nekomata on her own to fight through the entire tower. When one is journeying across the tower, especially in a sorry state like this, the score will be pitiful. That is why, throughout this, any and all damage will result in a reset. You can see how at the start Nekomata swiftly cuts through the enemies. That is, of course, because she is 20 levels above them. As soon as she runs into an elite enemy who is even just 10 levels below her, the damage loss is palpable, making you truly feel like you are no longer playing Zenless Zone Zero, but Mr. Mosquito for the PlayStation 2. The fact that the first elite we run into is Komano Manato, who resists physical, only makes things worse. And remember, throughout all of this, any and all damage will result in a reset. Even those that shouldn't even count as instances of damage, such as the puddle that Manato leaves on the ground. This alone would have a person give up on the challenge, as we are on floor 5 out of 50, but those people are probably not mentally ill, an advantage not many have, but I do. As such, the climb continues. In fact, it continues a bit too well. The following enemies only took basic planning to get through. You see, there is a very complex formula that one has to learn whenever playing Nekomata. One that many people are simply not smart enough to grasp. When you use your ultimate, having more targets inside of the damage area will result in more enemies getting hit. This plays off extremely well with Nekomata's gameplay quirk of having absolutely no range on most of her moves while dealing mediocre damage. It is with this that we have very quickly reached floor 10, one which surely will not give our cat any trouble. Ah, that is one thing I forgot to account for. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Shutdown, the greatest mechanic in the history of Zenless Zone Zero. While I am not actually being sarcastic in the general sense of the statement, I have to say that it really shows what the developers want you to do for it. You see, the time frame for parrying the hits of the shutdown are so wide that I could go have a meal, a succulent Chinese meal, in the time it takes for the hit to actually land after I press the button. Meanwhile, when you need to dodge, you have so little time that you'll be left looking at the animations, rigorously without any telegraphing, and wondering what even is hitting me right here. Clearly he just tackled me, but the damage is supposed to come from the sword slashes. Multiply this for the 5 times you need to dodge in a row, and you'll have turned a great mechanic into one that leaves you begging for MiHoYo to add a new Thrall boss fight, in which his time on top of Sobek are multiplied by 5 because it's somehow less infuriating. Of course, that is not a problem for me. You see, I am used to lasting very shortly, just like these dodge windows. It just takes some practice to get used to it. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. What is he doing now? This is the Corruptive Barrier, our brand new coat of paint of Miasma. I am not one of the people who dislike Miasma at all. I don't dislike this either. There is one problem though. Once again, the developers have forgotten that dodging is a thing. As you can see, the interaction between his parries and the dodge feel about as good as the dodge system of your average Steam asset flip Souls-like. but you can still get through it. Well, not really actually. You see, this guy is meant to be stunned and immediately break out of his stupid barrier. The thing changes a lot when you cut out the stunning part and the breaking the barrier part. Long story short, there are close to no openings left for you. Is it over already? Did the run end at 20% of the way there? From the very bottom of the grid when support and stun tier list, here comes A-rank Anby, which as you can see is not really built. With the power of the two girls combined, we now have the ability to actually make it past the shutdown and the first parry rush, and then... yeah, it's stun Anby, you can't expect too much out of her.
With this treasure, I summon...
Divine General, savior of free-to-play challenges, Nicole Demara. With Nicole added to the party, we have a team that could make any person who has just installed the game almost jealous until they realize that Nekomata is actually the second worst possible option out of the standard S-rank agents. Anyway, the Nicole I am using, just like Anby, isn't even meant to be used with a crit DPS such as Nekomata. All of her substat rolls have gone into anomaly proficiency, which in this case will probably work fine, but against most other enemies that don't just shield anomaly, her damage potential is probably going to be equal to Yexinguang sneezing on a physical resistant enemy. On top of that, may I remind you of one thing, the Nekomata build I've showed at the start has 32% pen ratio. You may think that's good, but in that case let me tell you how things truly work. You see, pen ratio and Nicole's defense shred do not mix well together. Instead of penetrating 72% of the defense like one may think, you are actually only penetrating around 59% of it. And that is not even taking into account the fact that Nekomata now effectively does not have an M4, or rather, she now has 14% crit rate over the cap thanks to Nicole. None of this team with how it's currently assembled is supposed to work. And yet, despite that, it sure is effective. We went from needing 2 parry rushes to destroy the barrier to destroying it mid-stun with an ideal stun rotation. That is probably over a 200% DPS increase. It didn't take long until we finally got past Romule, the first real roadblock of this challenge, officially getting us to 20% of the way there. Now then, why don't we talk about some of the wonderful characters we'll get to meet while we climb the next 10 floors. We can be blessed with the likes of Isolde, a professional rage baiter who manages to miss me with the first streak of shots, fucking up the timing for the second dodge because of the lack of a perfect dodge. Over and over again. But at the end of the day, a mini-boss like her will not stop our progress for long. Let's instead talk about the main course, the boss enemy. The Wandering Hunter. Zenless Zone Zero may be the only game I've ever seen where playing the boss the way the developers intended leads to not seeing everything he has to offer. Cause look at how he is moving. We are fighting the boss widely known in the community as an actual sponge which does nothing and exists solely to make you feel good about having built mana on your account, unless you are not a Void Hunter skipper like me, so you just use Yishuan against him. But some of us like to use salt in our food, it gives it flavor. But going back to what I was saying, this boss is known to be too passive. Those people did not fight him using only Nekomata and the starter A ranks clearly. What I am seeing is a guy who takes around 10% of his health from an ideal stun rotation while moving like Prime King Von. To beat him, it's not just a test of patience. Actually no, it is a test of patience. You truly only need patience and that's it. You see, during this run we are not in need of skill-intensive stun rotations. As Nekomata deals as much damage as wet paper, you need to stay composed. Don't sweat, just dodge. Eventually, the boss will be stunned and your ult will deal damage. Not much of it, but that's a problem for later. We have 10 minutes for each floor, that's plenty. Here, look, we only took 4 minutes to beat him. Ignore how it's floor 20. I'm going to be real. There is a very small part of me who wanted to push this team to the absolute top of the tower. But that small voice is stupid. We are getting to floor 50, and this means that this is the strongest Wandering Hunter that Nekomata will have to face. You may also have seen that not everyone there is at full health. That is because of the great advantage that having a team gives us. We can finally only reset when the score is too low. This mostly applies to bosses, as the score gained during them really overshoots the required score for S rank. I will still need to reset whenever I get hit outside of a boss stage, of course, because even taking one hit will reduce the score by as low as 10,000, but ever increasing after each 10 floors. This reduction makes the difference between S rank, very beautiful, and that disgusting A rank. As you climb the tower, you will learn to fall in love with the evolutionary endpoint of all life forms, the crab. This magnificent creature will appear every couple of floors with a challenge: open all chests but mine, or fight me. This challenge is easily won by those dotated of a pair of working eyes. If the chest from far away emits green lights, it's the one where the crab is. Just open those with red lights to gain a score that makes you forget briefly about the fact that you are using Nekomata Anby Nicole to clear content that was released in the 2.7 version of the game. You'd expect some absolutely comedic slap to the face right after talking about the crab, but somehow here comes something that one could make a compelling argument is actually easier to do than guessing red from green. I doubt a form of Daltonism like that even exists, but even if it doesn't, I believe I'd be more likely to find someone who has it than someone who has struggled fighting Typhoon Destroyer ever since they read his mechanics once. A masterclass of a fight involving pressing dodge 6 times and then parrying 3 times, dumping your stun and resources and doing the longest stun rotation in history. Repeat it twice if you're using a team consisting of Nekomata Anby instead of agents who deal damage, and you'll have the halfway point miniboss beat. What a better welcome to this latter half than a truly abhorrent choice of stage buffs for a team like this. We have Anomaly buff for my crit DPS team, Aftershock buff, buffing my 0 aftershock effects, and health drain for more score. While obviously what I had to pick in order to get at least some value, this went on to defeat the point of the previous statement I've made. Now, while the score is high enough to afford taking hits, my health is not high enough to afford it. So, each hit, no matter how weak or whether it's a game's quirk or not, will once again lead to a reset. It almost feels nostalgic to the early floors despite being the same exact day. Overall, the set of floors between 26 and 29 was as pleasant to get through as Sunday Church was for me back when I was a toddler, with the biggest offender being the Become My Fuel guy. You see, this elite isn't actually bad. I quite like him when I'm under normal circumstances, but these ain't no normal circumstances. Attempting to stun him with Anby is like attempting to convince a wall to let you through. Many were the times when I got hit right as I was done setting up the 3-hit combo, the one that she needs to fully use each time before an EX special in order to be an agent of any use. Not much of one, but at least any. You maybe noticed the fact that I said 26 to 29 without mentioning 30, despite it being a boss floor. After all, the previous 2 bosses absolutely had me pleading for my life, and this one has a higher damage increase and is level 70. On top of me having absolutely no health thanks to the health drain. That is because floor 30 is the Defiler. While many absolutely despise this boss, none of the reasons she's hated are relevant here. The time wasting is a non-issue in the tower, and the shielding isn't either, as the Nekomata Defiler matchup is actually quite good when you are using a real team composition. Long story short, what I'm trying to say is that I cleared the Defiler on my first attempt without ever getting hit. In fact, she barely got to move thanks to her long scripted phases. I, in fact, somehow had more issues getting through floor 31. If anything for the fact that I had no idea of how to deal with the nipple lasers as far away as I was. The main thing that makes this much better is the fact that the buffs are at least good, great even. With the double ultimate buff, I can undertake a binding vow to play like an absolute idiot until the first stun rotation by holding the Anby ult, which has been ready ever since the beginning of the fight, in order to instead get double Nekomata ultimates when I eventually stun. Which usually will do more damage, but this cloning guy I forgot the name of is a case of enemies that are way too tanky for a team consisting of stun Anby. That case list is very big, but this one's name is near the top. Another one on that list is Thracian, not because of the damage it takes. This one is in fact pretty easy to get through. The one problem is of course related to how Anby is a non-functional agent. The time between Thracian's attacks almost looks as if it was made to be only slightly faster than Anby can get to using her EX after the 3-hit combo. I am confident that some developer absolutely hates Anby, and creating enemies specifically meant to hard counter an agent nobody uses is his only way to let us know. Oh hey, look who is there. Remember when everyone was complaining about this guy when he came out? Yuan, or the Thrall, is one of the worst incredible bosses I've ever seen. None of his design choices make any real sense, and yet he's a very fun boss to fight whenever you are not in Deadly Assault. In fact, this is one of the few occasions when he should be fun, because he's being fought in the tower. So, why isn't he? Sobek is still a disgrace created by some sadistic being I cannot in good faith call a human. And the tower has made it so tanky for no reason. Whenever I am fighting Yuan, I am incredibly jolly, oversized lollipop and a propeller hat levels of jolly. Then he says, "Wait, I have to go to my sister real quick, you can play with my dog," and you are left fighting this mechanicless blob damage check, or specifically dialing check. Playing this boss with Anby is the Zenless Zone Zero equivalent of joining a slapping tournament as an amputee. I have done two things which have never been done before. The first is to actually see Sobek's full moveset, as failing to kill it before that moment usually means that you are better off resetting anyway. The second is to actually somehow win the fight against Yuan without defeating Yuan. Sobek is so tanky that I got Yuan to 0 health and ended the fight while he wasn't even on the battlefield. Either that, or he lost track of time while gunning to his sister. This fight, which is one of Nekomata's best matchups mind you, ended up taking over 4 minutes to clear, longer than what it took for Wandering Hunter, the physical resistant boss with 150% of the defense that enemies usually have. With Nekomata left in the same state that your pet hamster would be left in after getting thrown into a lion enclosure, I am forced to bring along Avocado Boo for these next floors. A technique I haven't used since the 1.4 era, when I was clearing the first tower while having skipped Caesar. Truly not an ideal situation to be in. The next floor is one which existed in the previous tower, but now put on heavy steroids. Or I assume it was. You see, back in the previous tower I was not demented enough to try using Anby. I was using Jufufu, which while being the image you see printed next to the word mediocre in the dictionary, made a difference so big that I'm here reminiscing for the good old times. The end of this floor had me sweating more than a Soukaku fan in a kindergarten. I had more than double the required score for S rank. If that isn't telling for how overtuned this floor actually is, for a literal fodder floor mind you, I don't know what to tell you. I am starting to get suspicious. I believe some higher being is attempting to prevent me from clearing with Nekomata to maintain an agenda, because I have never seen this enemy before in my life. They are adding new enemies I don't know the mechanics of in order to stop my progress. I am fully convinced that floor 38 is simply going to be 5 Sobeks at the same time. But maybe those 5 Sobeks will not even be as bad as these two guys. The fact that they are resistant to physical is also not slick at all. Those developers who are adding new enemies as I play are not doing a great job. In fact, these two are not just bad for Nekomata, they are tailor-made for me. They cover each other. They don't stagger easily, and as such start up their attacks while covered by Nicole's black holes. And, as they have a lot of red flashes, they will sometimes attack without being able to be parried while outside of the screen. Well, I do know this enemy. Evil Aria is an anomaly boss, which automatically makes her a bad matchup despite the physical weakness, but that's not my problem with her. I, for the life of me, can never get the timing for her shutdown right. Even in my winning attempt, I missed it twice, and because of that, all the work that Avocado Boo has done has been completely voided. Thing that would have mattered if the next floor boss wasn't Vesper. She is so scripted that getting past her despite Anby being as useful as purchasing a star is easy. She gets stunned after each shutdown and then spams the same parry rushes, which are never a problem when you are not trying to get a kill on her in Deadly Assault. Which I have done. Here is a screenshot. It's not like it's fun though, so I probably won't do it ever again. With the checkpoint reached and no way for Shiyuan to show his sorry ass back up, I have no expectations for some sort of absolute knee slapper of a situation that will have you giggling as you see the inner workings of an ever-degrading Italian man's mind. In fact, I am so convinced that this video's ending will be disappointingly straightforward that I am instead posting my Cissia Summons. I am pulling for her because of the combination of my love for reptiles and my terminal attraction to anime women.
Soldier 11 reporting for duty. Ready for action.
This game is really bad at comedic timing. God, she's so hot. And I am really bad at predicting how things will actually go, because welcome to floor 41, where you can have the pleasure to see me getting punted by Queso, a boss usually meant to be fought with rapture agents. You see, we have reached the point in which despite technically surviving and getting enough score to pass the stage, we have to reset upon even lightly getting tapped on the shoulder, as even that is going to take away well over half our total health pool. Pair that with the fact that we are once again offered a gourmet of fecal matter in our refined selection of sheer force buff for our zero rapture agents, anomaly buff for our crit DPS, and health drain for a higher score. You already know which one I am picking. So our actual health pool is going to decrease even while playing perfectly. And playing perfectly is what I did. Nekomata's liked taps do not deal significant damage without supports increasing her attack, damage percent and crit damage. This means that a perfect stun rotation on a rapture-oriented boss ends up dealing up to the damage of a singular hold basic from Yishuan. It takes 3 stun rotations to clear this enemy with Nekomata. And do remember that our stunner of choice is Anby, whose effectiveness is inversely proportional to the fact that the enemies are not set on do not move. These enemies are not hard, they will never be, but the fact that you are taking 3 minutes on a winning attempt to clear them is what truly makes this experience worth having whenever you get a feeling of being a bit too privileged. But clearly, you are still too privileged. Your ancestors were probably really bad people after all. That is what floor 42 aims to remind you of, by having you fight an entire private militia. This floor would be very easy were it not for these aggro-stealing mobs. In fact, look at this entire section where I took absolutely no damage until they showed up and made Anby activate her manual briefing for a second, leading to her dodging an attack from a mob and then target the boss on the opposite end of the arena. By now, I am starting to want everything and everyone to end. As such, I did not even bother resetting when the robot decided to hop around like everything is rainbows and flowers, hitting Nekomata for around 90% of her remaining health. One would expect floor 43 to be even worse, as it's a battle against Hugo. And that would be the case, were I not goated with the souls. In fact, Hugo is what I find to be one of, if not the greatest battle in Zenless Zone Zero. So much so that the pace of the battle was heavenly despite him moving so fast that Anby has as much use during the fight as getting the Diet Coke during your fast food meal because it's healthier. We are getting much too positive over here though. That is why right after a crab floor that completely restores our health and energy, we have to fight the bug. While offensively easy, as a fight it follows the design philosophy of we do not need to add mechanics to a fight meant for Ye Xingguang. Sometimes I prefer to get plowed from behind and eventually win in a terrible run than winning a fight taking no damage because it's against an enemy meant for the genetically inferior Ye Xingguang carry players. But maybe it's not the boss's fault. I, by now, have played so many floors using this terrible team that I have ascended to a whole new level. One where the fact that I got hit doesn't even matter. At the end of the floor, I will have enough points for S rank after all. You get to the point where you even stop being angry at Anby. That is, until you enter the fight against Jane Doe. During her triple charge, the best strategy to fully dodge it is to use a dodge counter after the first strike. This, of course, cannot be done with Anby, as she is a non-functional agent. Doing a dodge counter will instead leave her vulnerable just at the right time for the next hit to deal damage to her, creating nearly unavoidable instances of damage. But that can simply be fixed by being more skilled and only using the dodge counter after the second dash. What cannot be fixed is the fact that with the way Jane works, hitting the 3-hit combo will lead to Jane dodging the EX special nearly every time. But even saying it cannot be fixed could be what experts call a skill issue. In fact, you can still make use out of Anby. You just need to have bolts made out of titanium. Have a fuck it with ball mentality whenever you see Jane readying an attack. Think in your head, Anby will finish her string before she starts attacking, and she'll run right into my EX special. While that may not actually work every time, it is what makes the difference between a person who suffers and a person who has suffered long enough to start feeling a sadistic enjoyment out of it.
This won't hurt. No, you don't have what it takes.
I would say it was easy, but you'd find me a liar. You were magnificent, miasmic Jane Doe. I will remember you as long as I live. With the girl's health bars proportionally low relative to their usefulness, there is nothing standing in her way except for the final boss, Primordial Nightmare. Almost as if predestined, the final boss of our climb is a boss aimed at physical attacker agents, and she doesn't get stunned much anyway. The most ideal enemy we could be fighting. With this, the climb is over. Truly, the real final boss was Jane Doe all along. Alright, I'm done, I want to build a Cissia now.